Hello everyone, my name is Tian Hatting. I'm the author of the series of textbooks entitled Biblical Hebrew for All. In volume 5 of this series, we have looked at 400 texts from the Hebrew Bible, from the Old Testament, where we find that the modern English translations are not very accurate in showing us exactly what we find in the original Hebrew. And in this video, we are looking at one of those cases. The text is 1 Chronicles 4, chapter 4, verses 9 and 10, and it's called the Prayer of Jabez. In the Old Testament book of 1 Chronicles, we find that the very first word is actually a name, Adam, like in Adam and Eve. And then for 9 chapters, we have lists of names of the descendants of the patriarchs through the generations, right up to the 12 tribes of Israel. But in chapter 4, we do find something amazing. In verse 8, we still have the names of people, and then in verse 9, we find a sentence, and Jabez was more honorable than his brethren. And then in verse 10, we find what is known today as the Prayer of Jabez. Oh, that you would bless me indeed and enlarge my territory, that your hand would be with me, and that you would keep me from evil, that it may not cause pain. This is from the New King James Version. In the Hebrew, there are only 2 points that I would like to emphasize. The first one is these 2 words. The first word is Bareich, and you can see the stem, the root of the verb is Barak, okay, means to bless. And in this next word, you can see the stem again, Barak, okay. This first one is the infinitive absolute, and this one is just an ordinary imperfect verb. But together, in Hebrew, they form a construction that is used to emphasize something very, very strongly. And that is why we have that you would indeed bless me. The second point I would like to make is that the last sentence says, that not that it may pain me, and he granted God what he asked. This is not a big problem, but some English translations have got it incorrect there. But in general, the modern English translations have translated the Hebrew quite accurately. What happened is that in 2000, Bruce Wilkinson published a book called The Prayer of Jabez, Breaking Through to the Blessed Life. It was the first book in a series that he wrote,
and the book became an international bestseller, topping the New York Times bestseller list and selling 9 million copies. There was very serious criticism after this book was published. Jabez had been compared to the prosperity gospel and had received the reproaches often addressed towards that doctrine. In other words, that this prayer suggests that God ought to do what people want rather than the people following God's will. In my view, we should remind ourselves of Matthew 7:7 that says, "Ask and it will be given to you." And in James we find, "You do not have because you do not ask." If we go and read the book, we will see that in chapter 2, Wilkinson actually writes that this prayer has nothing in common with the prosperity theology, as Jabez was asking in blind faith and trusted God to bless him where and when and how it pleased him. Now, if we go back to the Hebrew, we will see that the first prayer is that you would bless me, and the second one is that you will enlarge, and this word is my border, implying, because in those days the more land somebody possessed, the more influence he had. So the implication here is that please enlarge my border so that I could have more influence. In other words, the Hebrew shows us very clearly that material possessions were not involved at all. It was a prayer to God to enlarge his influence that he would have in society and in the kingdom. So in my view, this prayer is useful. Many people have testified that by praying this prayer, they have enriched their lives, but we should really make sure that we understand the meaning of the prayer. So I hope you have learned something, and that is that we should always go back to the original Hebrew before we make any conclusions from what we actually find in the Bible.
So I hope you've found this case study interesting, showing us that we should always be careful when dealing with the Old Testament or with the Bible in general, but in the case of the Old Testament, we should always take heed of the original Hebrew and before we make any conclusions of what is actually said. So with that, thank you very much for watching, and in light of the pandemic, as always, stay safe.